Wake up, America, it's Drew Breezy. I want to attempt to clear up a couple of myths that are being perpetuated online through social media and YouTube about the police response to Uvalde, Texas, where a lone gunman murdered 19 children and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School. Coming up. I figured I'd start today with a Drew Breezy quote. He said, I pray for peace. He said, I pray for health. He said, I pray for freedom. He said, I pray for this little container of Cool Mint dental floss. I pray for all of those. Dental floss. For everybody, dental floss. That's horrible.
Recognize that you run to the sound of gunfire. When you get to gunfire, you don't stop. Okay? When you get there, you run into gunfire, okay? And it's so important to do so. And I'll tell you what, I've said it before, and I hope I'm understood. There's no doubt in my mind that those officers were gone. Any one of them would sacrifice their lives for those children. Any one of them. If they knew there was kids in that room and teachers in that room, I'm great confidence that those police officers, those local officers, would have done what was right. 11:40.
Okay, well, since his microphone cut out, and this is probably one of the more poignant quotes of the hearing, I'll relay what he said if you didn't read the subtext or the closed caption. I've said it before, and I hope to underscore this. There's no doubt in my mind those officers would have gone. Any one of them would have sacrificed their lives for those children. Any one of them. If they knew there was kids in that room that were teachers in that room, I have great confidence in officers that those police officers, those local officers, would have done what was right. That's what he said. That's what he testified to in the committee, in the Senate Special Committee. When you throw the term coward around and you undermine law enforcement, and now we have 4-year-olds shooting at law enforcement, and we have kids in diapers in Minnesota slapping at law enforcement, and we have people in New York firing dart guns at law enforcement, calling them bitches and whatever. And then we have influencers, even conservative influencers, not criticizing, spreading false information. It's going to undermine law enforcement. It's going to drive the violent crime up because there's a mass exodus of law enforcement officers, if you haven't noticed. And from my perspective, what I see and what I'm most alarmed by is the number of suicides in law enforcement because of societal pressures and bad information that's put out from overly critical non-law enforcement people. It's fine to be curious. It is horrible to be judgmental about a job that you've never done. Okay, so a lot of these myths are being perpetuated from a YouTube channel known as Fieldcraft Survival Channel. It's run, from what I understand, there's 551,000 subscribers. One of the videos that's perpetuating these myths has close to 800,000 views, or over 800,000 views, and another one has 1 million views, another video. This, from what I understand, is run by a former Green Beret. He runs a company that provides survival training, more than likely for profit. I'm not going to question his motives on why he would make this video calling these officers cowards, but certainly it would be an opportunity for him to say, hey, I'd like to step up and provide some training for you. Hopefully he would do that for free. But here's one of the things that he's saying happened.
Here's some breathtaking details that came away from the conversation that I had with a federal supervisor who has intimate understanding because he supervises a lot of those officers that were on scene, but understands the totality of the circumstances that took place. 1, the classroom doors were never locked. Even upon request of getting the keys, at the time in which officers breached the door at 12:50, they didn't have to use a breaching tool.
So he is saying that a friend of his who supervises some of the people that made the entry, told him that nobody needed a key and all they did was open the door. But the odd thing about that is, on page 61 of 77 in the Rob committee report, it says that Commander Guerrero, who was the leader of the breach entry team, said, quote, "I placed the key into the keyhole. The key worked, and I was able to unlock and open the door." So obviously, the guy that was there and provided testimony in front of the House, or at least gave a report, which was entered into the record in front of the House, said that he used a key.
We'd heard reports that the lock was malfunctioning, that they had turned in a request for the lock to be fixed. Is that all fictitious? Or
We had a locksmith inspect the lock and the strike plate. The lock was functional. The strike plate was not. What's not happening is, so as you can see on this door here, is that, yes, the lock was working as it was designed, but if it doesn't, the through doesn't get into the strike plate, it may be locked, but it's not secure. You can just open it. And that's, so it can be the locked position, ironically, in the locked position or unlocked position, and it's still unsecured and can be opened.
I want to clarify and make sure that I heard this correctly. The classroom door that he entered, did I hear you correctly say that the lock was broken, that it did not?
The lock was not broken. The strike plate was dysfunctional, and the only way you can get it to lock is from the outside is lock in the lock position. And it's nuanced, and that's why we brought one of the doors in the lock position, and then pull on it and get it to seat, the throw to seat in the lock plate. Well, if you can do that, then it would be locked, okay, or I'll call it secured. It would be secured at that time.
So while there was a lot of time lapse in your timeline, waiting on a key, and there's a lot of the communication that you have transcribed. The fact, could we ascertain here or conclude that there was never a need for a key because the lock was not working, the swipe plate was not working properly?
I don't believe, I don't believe, based on the information that we have right now, that door was ever secured. In fact, I have great reason to believe it wasn't secured. The subject doesn't just walk in, as I testified before, then shoot the classroom, walk back out of the hallway, then walk back in again seamlessly, okay? And he didn't have a key, and he couldn't lock it from the inside. So the door was unsecured, and we've gone back and checked in our interviews, and did anybody touch the door and try it? How about, do you need a key? Well, one of the things they teach you in active training, I'm sure that one of the experts can talk about it, how about trying the door and see if it's unlocked?
He's basing it on the theory that the shooter got in and out, that the shooter walked in the school unabated, and then in an interior door just opened it because it was, they don't know if it was locked or unlocked. The door possibly could have been locked, but it just didn't catch on the hasp. So it's very possible that the door was locked, it just wasn't closed all the way. And what they see on video is the door to room 111. Apparently the shooter takes some shots somewhere, walks up and opens the door. There are more gunshots heard. For some reason, he comes out of the door again. They see in the hallway. They don't know if he came out of 111 or 112, and shoots some more and then goes back in, at which point you see the initial team arrive. So for anyone to say that door was unlocked is a guess. There's no way of knowing that for sure. It only locks from the outside. There has been damage to the lock reported, to the throw and the catch part, not to the lock part. And nobody tried the door, and the only people that would know actually used a key to get in. Unless there is something that they're not telling us, it is possible that the shooter walked into that classroom and pulled the door shut all the way. In his interview with the Texas Department of Public Safety, teacher from room 111, Arnulfo Reyes, who was shot during the incident, He said in his interview that teachers and students in the building widely knew that the door to his classroom frequently did not lock, and that he had gotten into trouble several times when Uvalde CISD police officers found the door unlocked. He stated that on multiple occasions he reported the malfunctioning lock to school administrators, who stated that the request had been turned in. As was the apparent practice among Robb Elementary teachers, Reyes never submitted a work order to repair the door lock himself. That was normally what happened. You just tell the administrator creates the work order, or their assistant. Principal Gutierrez, in her own testimony, confirmed that school administration knew about the issues with that door, stating that it was reported around spring break of 2022. That comes from page 28 of 77 of the Robb Committee report. Why am I making such a big deal of this door? It's because everybody is perpetuating this myth that the door was definitely unlocked and they never checked it. That's not true. There is no way to definitively say that the door was unlocked. The breachers used a key to get in, and the teacher himself testified that he didn't know if the door was locked or not. We revert to our training, which is from the Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training from the Texas State University, that says there's a module including that's titled "Entering Locked Buildings Quickly and Discreetly and Safely." Responders should be creative and make use of improvised tools to get inside the building however they can. With respect to using keys, Alert teaches that often the quickest, most discreet, and safest method of entering a locked building is to locate a key, as long as a key can be located immediately. But if a key cannot be located quickly, responders should use another technique to enter the area without delay, which is why Chief Arredondo was continually calling for breaching tools and never learned when those breaching tools arrived. A separate module anticipates the challenge of breaching closed and locked outward doors, just like the ones that they met with in room 111. Many public buildings are required by law to have outward opening doors with self-closing mechanisms for all high occupancy rooms, and that law enforcement responders should be prepared to encounter this type of door during an active response. They were not prepared for this, and this is one of the things that we can correct. Now, with respect to what they teach about those locked doors, Alert put in their after action, the first rule of breaching is to try the door. However, in their training module, there is no mention of that. It's just implied common sense. It's not what they train or teach, though. It may be from here on forward, but it wasn't what the Uvalde CISD people and Uvalde PD people learned. These myths are being perpetuated. The rest, I'm going to just compare and contrast what was testified to and what this misinformation video is being put out, that everybody seems to believe just because this guy is a Green Beret. I have the utmost respect for him and anybody who served in the military. I am a veteran as well. I'm also a veteran of law enforcement, and I'm not just going to stand down while people call these guys cowards without full facts, and even worse, using fake facts, especially when you stand on a platform where you're teaching people survival for profit.
Situation where innocent lives were lost, innocent lives were potentially injured. They had none of that information. They were literally waiting for the deliberate operation to take place because they thought it was a single shooter in the classroom alone. That all changed when they entered the classroom. When they entered the classroom, the shooter came out of a closet and began shooting at them. As they began shooting at them, most of the assault force never entered the room. Three brave men of BORTAC, operators, went inside that room with one ballistic shield and put down that bad guy. 3
times you've been wrong already. So 4 made it in, according to Director McCraw in his actual testimony, not what he heard from a friend of a friend. And on top of that, the door closed behind the first set of people, so the second set couldn't get in. But if the door was unlocked... So my point is this. There were 7 people stacked, as you'll hear Director McCraw testify in a second. 7 people were stacked, and the initial 4 made it in. The door closed behind them. Somehow the other 3 had to be let in or got in. And 5 people engaged the shooter. In fact, one of them took a round to his ball cap, not 3. And it's got nothing to do with the bravery, or it's got nothing to do with the cowardice of the other 4. This is just an asinine assertion on his part, and I'll call it like I said.
The camera enters from the east hallway. 11:50, the breach and termination gunfire. At the time, there was a stack of 7 officers that went in. Actually, only 4 went directly in because the door closed, as will happen in some of these operations, and left the 3 out. 3 minutes thereafter, shortly thereafter, 5 officers fired rounds at the subject, killing the subject at that time.
And listen to his choice of words.
I believe it's an hour, 33 hour, 26 minutes or something like that. All of that time, he had time to prepare, to barricade himself in a position, 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 to ambush those law enforcement officers.
So, in this expert's opinion, this guy had time to barricade himself? Is it really that out of the ordinary to consider this a barricaded subject if you don't know there are kids in the classroom, if you can't see in the windows, if the windows to the door where the bullets were flying through are very thin, and in an active shooter protocol, kids are kept out of view of the window, the lights are shut off, and the blinds or shades are drawn so nobody can see from the outside? Is it really that out of the ordinary, or is it really that far of a stretch or horrible leadership for someone to think that this is a barricaded subject? I understand the fact that school was in session, so the assumption should be that children are in the classroom, but those were the indicators they were working with, and taking the totality of circumstances, they made the wrong decision. And I think that they know that. But I don't think it was intentional, and I don't think they were doing it because they were cowards. That's a very strong assertion for some people whose lives are going to be changed forever, and the families of the 19 victims and 2 teachers who are going to be changed forever. He talks about how long this guy had to prepare to ambush law enforcement officers, meaning he popped out of a closet and they killed him, but he had all of this time to prepare for that. The shooter did. But I thought, just based on what everybody's saying and what lies are being perpetuated, that he was murdering people for 77 minutes, and the kids were screaming the whole time. Well, as it turns out, even by what this guy has for information, it's not the case. The initial officers heard gunfire as they were coming in. The video even shows that. Then the gunfire stopped. There was a point in time before they made entry that there were more gunshots. But for the most part, however long that took to enter, to breach the door, it was not like that guy was systematically picking off young children and there were screams. That was what the officers said that made them believe that no one was in the room. It was silent in there. It was eerily quiet. And now we understand why. The horrible tragedy of it all.
Their shock, their surprise, when they opened the breach point and they said they see dead children everywhere. That was a surprise because they didn't know. And those officers are testifying. They didn't even know. If they knew, they would have went in. I know they would have went in. Because I was surprised that there were subsequent shots fired and no officers hastily went in. It's because none of the information was relayed. The chief of police wasn't even in the fight, completely checked out.
He's saying the chief of police was checked out and wasn't even in the fight. Did you watch the testimony? Did you read the timeline? Anything? I mean, the chief was actively on the radio trying to find keys. He was in an office trying to figure out what to do. He cleared a room on his own. He didn't, remember when he said he didn't know that he was in command? Well, that's not checked out. That means he was engaged in the fight. So the so-called expert thinks he was checked out. Here's a snippet from the hearing.
Except for that room, we still have people down, but just past the flag to the right. But we're ready to breach, but that door is locked. 1233. The chief. I say we breach through those windows and shoot his explosive head off through the windows.
And if you want to read the Robb Elementary report, the Robb Committee report, you can see Chief Arredondo's testimony. He was not checked out. This is just a best guess of an expert that has 866,000 views. Here's what I want to say about this guy on the cell phone that I've been dying to say. As somebody who was a police commander, as somebody who was a shift commander, a middle manager in a law enforcement agency, I can tell you with 100% certainty that if I'm on the scene and I'm running things and a cop shows up with a gun, he doesn't have a clear head if he knows that his family is involved in that. Now, everybody says that that should fuel his desire to get in the classroom and that everybody held him back, and that's a bunch of hooey. He was walking around in circles, nervous. He didn't know what to do. He's thinking about, man, how am I going to live without her? This is the love of my life, or whatever. But I think it's common sense to me, and maybe I'm not doing a good job at evaluating why it's not common sense to anybody else. Don't send the emotionally charged guy with a gun into a room with a bunch of kids in there where you're about to go exact revenge for your family. It's not a wise idea. I can also tell you, and I'm not talking out of school because I've learned this, something similar happened in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas case, where there may have been a law enforcement officer on scene who had a family member that was inside the school, and they weren't thinking with a clear head. Now I'm taking that as secondhand information or third-hand information, but it was witnessed. It's common. When you deliver bad news to cops, they don't necessarily keep it all together like in the movies and go exact their revenge. It doesn't work that way. I think if you've seen any documentary like the documentary on the Korengal Valley, I believe it's called Restrepo, where the battle buddy is killed. You know, you got one guy and his battle buddy, and they show their relationship throughout the film, and then the battle buddy takes fire and he dies. This guy was inconsolable. His battle buddy was inconsolable. A true badass, but completely inconsolable. I just want to look at him. I just want to see his face. There's got to be something we can do. You're not thinking very clearly. And in these moments, we need to be thinking clearly. And additionally, here's all I want to say. This is the last thing I'm going to say about this. I don't know if they had kids or not. God rest the soul of Eva Morales. She was a 23-year teacher from what I understand. But if they had had kids and they knew that she was in there dying and they sent this guy in there to go exact the revenge or to take the shooter out, and for some reason he was killed, his kids would be orphans. And that would be on everybody's head, and all of you would be saying the same thing. Why would you let that guy go in there? That would be what you hung your hat on, and you know it. I think I could go on and bring up about 3 or 4 more examples in this guy's video alone. And then he did a subsequent video that was even more harsh from what I understand. I don't care enough what this guy says, to be honest, to go through the second video. I already know where his head is. And quite frankly, I'm doing this just to highlight the fact that people are lobbing grenades in the center of law enforcement, and they're undermining their own safety in doing that. And on top of that, I'm not doing this for any profit whatsoever. I'm just doing this. I'm trying to defend law enforcement not for the mistakes they made, because there are plenty of mistakes that were made, but for the bad information that's being spread about them, the attempts to vilify them, the callous notion that they stood around while babies were being murdered. That is probably the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life, and it's a disservice to each and every victim, the 19 children and the 2 teachers that died. It wasn't a matter of them just standing there because they didn't want to do something. I can guarantee that. That's not in the heart, soul, and mind of any cop, and I'll debate that with you all day long. The rest, we're going to have to rely on facts, and I think I presented some facts to you today. Draw your own conclusions. Be curious. Don't be judgmental. Wait for the full facts to come out. I'm Drew Breezy, and I'm entitled to my opinion. Hey everybody, it's Drew Breezy. I figured I'd start today with a Drew Breezy quote. He said, I pray for peace. He said, I pray for health. He said, I pray for freedom. He said, I pray for this little container of cool mint dental floss. I pray for all of this. Dental floss. For everybody, dental floss. That's horrible. So I guess the lesson here is, don't get caught up in this little container of cool mint dental floss. That's horrible. That's horrible. Drew Breezy here. I pray for all of this.